Leora had always believed that life changed slowly like seasons drifting from one color to another, but she was wrong because everything shifted for her in a single afternoon when she walked into a quiet old library at the edge of the city. She was searching for nothing in particular, maybe peace, maybe distraction, maybe silence. She had recently ended a long relationship that left her feeling hollow, as if someone had carved out a part of her spirit and left the edges raw as she moved through the aisles of books, running her fingers gently across the spine, trying to feel something familiar, something grounding, something that reminded her she was still alive. But then she noticed a man sitting alone at a wooden table near a large window, sunlight spilling over him like a warm sheet. He was writing in a notebook, his expression calm, focused, almost poetic. There was nothing extraordinary about him, yet something about the stillness in his presence pulled her attention in a way she could not explain. He looked up briefly, and their eyes met only for a second, but that single second stirred something in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. She looked away, quickly embarrassed, unsure why a stranger had suddenly shaken the quiet inside her. She wandered to another section, pretending to read, but her mind kept drifting back to him. She did not understand why she felt drawn to someone she didn't know, someone who had not spoken a word to her, someone who had done nothing but exist. Peacefully in the sunlight, after a few minutes, she returned to the central aisle and found him gone. For a strange moment, she felt disappointment, a soft, unexpected ache. She pushed it aside, grabbed a random book, and headed toward the exit. But as she stepped out, she heard a calm voice behind her saying, "You dropped this," even though he used no punctuation or emphasis. The tone carried warmth. She turned to see him holding the book she thought she had placed back on the shelf. She took it from him, feeling oddly flustered, and thanked him softly. He nodded, and his gaze lingered on her, as if he sensed something. She was trying hard to hide, a heaviness, a sorrow, a quiet exhaustion. He told her that he often spent his days in that library because it was the only place where his mind felt clear, where the noise of the world softened, where he could hear himself think. And Leora understood that feeling too, deeply, more deeply than she wished to admit. They walked out together without planning to, and he introduced himself as Soren. His name felt gentle and steady like the way he carried himself. They ended up walking toward a small park nearby, the air cool, the sky soft with evening light. Neither of them spoke for the first stretch, yet the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was easy, natural, as if both their hearts recognized something before their minds could process it. Eventually she told him that she had been searching for something, without knowing what, and he responded simply that. Sometimes people search for themselves without realizing it. She looked at him, surprised by the truth in his words, and he smiled, a small, quiet smile that reached his eyes. They sat on a bench watching children chase each other, laughing, while leaves rustled softly overhead. Soren told her he had lost someone years ago, someone he cared for deeply, and after he carried a weight he didn't know how to put down. Leora listened carefully because his pain sounded like an echo of hers, like they were two different reflections of the same wound. He told her that healing was not a single moment, but 1,000 tiny choices to keep living even when the heart felt heavy, and she felt something loosen inside her, something she had been holding too tightly for too long. She shared parts of her story with him, how she stayed in a relationship that slowly dimmed her light, how she kept forgiving things that chipped away at her spirit, how she woke up one day feeling like a stranger inside her own life. Soren listened without interrupting, absorbing her words like they mattered, like she mattered. And she felt seen in a way she had forgotten was possible. The sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the park, and neither of them moved. They sat there as if suspended in time, two strangers who somehow felt less like strangers and more like two souls meeting at the exact moment they needed. When the breeze grew cooler, Soren stood and gently asked if she would like to walk a little more, and she nodded, because for the first time in months she did not feel heavy. She felt quiet ease. As they walked, the lamplights flickered on one by one, lining the path in a warm glow. Soren told her he believed that people cross paths for reasons, sometimes to teach, sometimes to support, sometimes simply to remind us we're still capable of feeling. She looked at him and wondered silently what reason brought him into her life, but she didn't ask. Instead, she let the moment unfold naturally, slowly, beautifully. When they reached the end of the path, he stopped and told her he hoped their paths would cross again. Her heart pulled slightly at his words, and she said she hoped the same. They parted there, but as she walked away, she felt warmth blooming in her chest, a gentle spark of something she thought she had lost forever, possibility, the quiet beginning of something new, something tender, something real. She didn't know if she would see him again, but as she stepped into the soft glow of the evening, she realized something important for the first time in a long while. Her life did not feel like something she was surviving. It felt like something she could begin again. Leora woke up the next morning with an unusual lightness, in her chest a soft, unfamiliar warmth that stayed with her even after she brewed her coffee and sat near her window watching the early sun stretch across the quiet street. She replayed the previous evening again and again, not because something dramatic had happened, but because something subtle had shifted inside her, like the quiet turning of a page in a book where the story begins to change in ways you could not yet see. She wondered if she would see Soren again, and immediately corrected herself, refusing to cling to a hope that might hurt her later. But even as she tried to brush the thought away, her mind lingered on the way. He looked at her with steady, attentive eyes, as if nothing she said felt small or unimportant. She spent the day running errands, drifting through tasks with half her mind aware of a new, strange anticipation. By late afternoon, she decided to visit the library again, not because she expected to see him, but because it felt strangely comforting now, like a place that held a new memory. When she walked inside, the familiar scent of old pages wrapped around her, and she felt an unexpected calm. She wandered through the aisles aimlessly until she reached the wooden table near the window, the same place she first saw him. She hesitated not, wanting to seem foolish for hoping, and sat down pretending to read a random book she had picked from the shelf. She told herself repeatedly that she was only enjoying the quiet, that it had nothing to do with him, but deep down she knew there was a truth she was avoiding acknowledging. And then, as if summoned by the quiet beating of her heart, she heard footsteps approaching, and she looked up to see Soren standing there holding a book, his eyes full of a gentle recognition that made her chest tighten. He greeted her softly and asked if she minded if he sat, and she shook her head, trying to hide the smile that tugged at her lips. He sat across from her, the sunlight catching the edges of his hair, and for a moment neither spoke, yet the silence was comfortable, much like the evening before. He asked how she was feeling today, and she said lighter, and he nodded as if he expected that, as if he knew yesterday had done something for her. Even if she had not realized it fully, she asked what brought him back to the library, and he told her it was his ritual, a place where he could breathe, think, and gather himself. And she realized she longed for a place like that too, somewhere she could return when the world felt too loud. They talked for a long while about books, about the simple things that made them feel at peace, about the heavy things they both carried without knowing how to release them. Leora found herself telling him things she had not voiced in years, thoughts she kept buried, feelings she avoided out of fear that speaking them aloud would reopen old wounds. But Soren listened the same way he had before, with steady patience, with presence, with quiet understanding that made her feel less alone. They decided to take another walk, this time not to the park, but to a small path behind the library lined with tall trees that swayed softly with the afternoon breeze. As they walked, she noticed how the sunlight filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns across the ground, and she wondered how many beautiful things she had not noticed in the past few years simply because she had been too hurt, too tired, too distracted to look. Soren told her he used to walk this path often during the most difficult years of his life, that these trees had witnessed all his silent battles and all the moments he nearly gave up, and she was struck by how someone so calm had once felt lost too. They reached a small hidden clearing where a single bench sat beneath an old maple tree, the leaves above swirling in the gentle wind. They sat down, and Soren leaned back, looking up at the sky, as if searching for something far beyond sight. He told her that healing was not a destination, but a practice, something you did one breath at a time, one step at a time, one choice at a time. And she felt the truth of it settle deep inside her bones. She asked him how he knew so much about healing, and he told her he had learned the hard way, through heartbreak, through failure, through letting go of someone he loved, even when it felt like tearing his own heart apart. He said something that stuck with her, that sometimes losing someone teaches you, not about them, but about yourself, about the places inside you that need care, forgiveness, and gentleness. She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the back of her eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition, because she had abandoned herself in her past relationship far longer than she had realized. She had stopped dreaming, stopped trying, stopped reaching for anything that made her feel alive. She had slowly disappeared, and sitting there beside him, she felt the first flicker of herself returning. Soren looked at her and told her she deserved to feel alive again, that her story was not over, that she was allowed to rebuild, even if she did not know where to start. His words landed in her chest like soft anchors, reminding her she still had weight, still had purpose, still had a voice that mattered more than she believed. They walked back slowly, neither wanted the moment to end. But when they reached the entrance of the library, Leora knew she needed time to sit with everything stirring inside her. Soren sensed it too, and instead of asking to see her again, he simply said, "If our paths cross again, I will be glad. And if they don't, I hope today still gave you something real." And she nodded, because she understood what he meant. He was not clinging. He was allowing connection to be free, unforced, honest. She went home, and that evening she lit a candle, sat beside her window, and opened a fresh notebook. She wrote for the first time in years, not about him, not about her past, not about her pain, but about what she wanted her life to feel like moving forward. She wrote about softness. She wrote about strength. She wrote about rediscovering pieces of herself she had forgotten. And as she wrote, she felt the quiet, steady truth of something she had not expected. She wanted to see Soren again, not because she needed him, not because she was lonely, but because something inside her awakened when she was near him, something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. She closed the notebook and took a deep breath, listening to the hum of the night outside, and she realized she was no longer afraid of tomorrow. For the first time in a very long time, she felt a whisper of hope. The next morning, Leora woke up earlier than usual, with the soft glow of dawn gently brushing against her curtains, as if inviting her into a day that carried new possibilities. She stretched slowly, feeling a strange but welcome calm in her chest, a calm that felt like the beginning of healing. She dressed, made her coffee, and stood by the window, watching the quiet street outside, remembering the notebook she wrote in the night before. She picked it up and reread her words, and for the first time in years, she felt proud of herself, not for anything she had achieved, but simply for choosing to show up for her own heart. She decided that today she would do something she had avoided for a long time, something that made her feel alive. She went for a walk, not with a purpose, not to escape her thoughts, but to breathe, to notice, to be present. She walked through the park, noticing things she never paid attention to before: the texture of the tree bark, the sound of birds hidden in the branches, the way the sunlight reflected on small patches of water. She realized how many years she had lived on autopilot, letting life pass, while she carried old wounds like silent weights tied to her soul. She sat on a bench, letting the breeze wash over her, closing her eyes for a moment, and feeling the simple beauty of being alive. Again, she knew she might cross paths with Soren. Again, or maybe not, and she understood that the story unfolding inside her was not about him. It was about her reclaiming her presence, her voice, her ability to feel joy without fear. She went home and decided to do something she had not done in a long time. She cooked a meal for herself, not something quick thrown together out of routine, but something she enjoyed, something that reminded her she deserved care. She set the table neatly, lit a candle, and ate slowly, tasting every bite like a small celebration. She realized that healing was not dramatic moments, but small, consistent acts that reminded her she was worth effort, even from herself. Later in the afternoon, she picked up a book, one she had tried to read months ago, but abandoned because her mind was too crowded to focus today. The words felt different, clearer, calmer, as if her mind finally had space. She read for hours, losing herself in the story, until the sky outside turned golden, and the room dimmed with evening. She stood up, stretched, and felt something shift again, something gentle but powerful. She wanted to go back to the library, not to look for him, but because it had become a place tied to her awakening. She walked there slowly, enjoying the cool evening air. When she entered, a familiar scent wrapped around her like a quiet welcome. She made her way to the same wooden table near the window, and to her quiet surprise, she saw Soren sitting there reading. She froze for a moment, unsure whether to approach, but before she could make a decision, he looked up as if he sensed her presence. His eyes softened with recognition, not surprise, as though he had hoped she might come but never expected it. He motioned gently for her to sit, and she did, feeling the warmth of something unspoken settle between them. They talked again, but this time their conversation flowed with an ease that felt like they had known each other far longer than they did. He told her about the parts of his life he rarely shared, about his dreams, his quiet fears, his small joys, and she listened with the same presence he had given her before she realized how rare it was to feel this kind of mutual openness, without pressure, without expectation, without fear. This was connection in its purest form. She told him about her morning, about writing in her notebook, about the walk in the park, about the small ways she was trying to return to herself. He listened carefully and said he was glad she was choosing life again. Something in his tone made her heart flutter, not in a desperate way, but in a deep, warm way that reminded her she was still capable of feeling something real. As the library prepared to close, they stepped outside together, standing on the steps under the soft glow of the streetlights. The world felt quiet around them. Soren looked at her for a long moment and said that he was proud of her, not because she had achieved something grand, but because she was rising from a place where many choose to stay fallen. And that strength, he said gently, was rare and beautiful. She felt tears gather again, but not from sadness, from gratitude, from being seen by someone who did not want to take from her, but simply witness her. She asked him if he wanted to walk a little more before they parted, and he agreed, They walked down the street slowly, the night around them peaceful, their steps matching. Without effort, they talked about life and dreams and all the small things that made them who they were. And at one point, they felt silent, not awkward, but full of understanding. They reached a corner where their paths would separate, and Soren turned to her, telling her that he hoped she would continue choosing herself every day, even on the days it felt impossible. She nodded and asked quietly if they would see each other again. He smiled softly and said that life would bring them together whenever the moment was right, and she realized that he was not a chapter to cling to, but a presence that arrived exactly when she needed a reminder of her own strength. She walked home with a quiet fullness. Inside her, not attachment, but a warm, steady flame that told her she was changing. She spent the rest of the evening sitting by her window, watching the city lights flicker and listening to the hum of distant life. And she understood something she had forgotten for years, that her story was not over, that she was not too late, not too broken, not too far gone. She placed a hand on her chest, feeling her heartbeat calm, steady, real. And she whispered to herself that she was proud for surviving, proud for trying, proud for opening her heart. Again, even just to herself, she knew tomorrow might bring fear, doubt, or old memories, but she also knew she had awakened something inside her that would not let her disappear again. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and felt the quiet truth she had been searching for. She was alive, and she was ready for the rest of her story.